All right, we'll see if this is going to record now. So we're going to start off with the quadratic formula, which everybody knows the quadratic formula, right? What is it?
Is this 4.2?
This is 4.2, yeah. So 4.2 has quadratic formula and completing the square because it's both ways to solve a quadratic equation. Most people like quadratic formula better, but we have to learn both. We're going to need to know completing the square for when we start graphing parabolas and stuff. The quadratic formula is this. You've been using this for 3 years, at least.
More.
Yeah, at least. So let's go through a couple of problems with this, make sure we remember what we're doing, and then we will do completing the square, and then that's it for today. So if you have this equation, x squared minus 7x minus 11 equals 0, you first have to figure out what a, b, and c are. Remember that a is the coefficient in front of the x squared, so this problem is 1. B is negative 7, it's the coefficient of the x, and then the constant is the c. The quadratic formula only works when you have an equal 0 at the end, so if it's ever not an equal 0, you have to move it over to the left side to make it an equal 0. So you got to make sure it has an equal 0 before you start the problem. And now you just have to plug it into the formula. So the formula says negative b, so negative 7 is 7. B squared means negative 7 squared, and then negative 4 times 1 times negative 11. From here, use your calculator. So you can just type in this whole piece right here, negative 7 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 11, and it should give you 93. Because this part is 49 right here, and this part is plus 44 right here. So it's 7 plus or minus the square root of 93 over 2. At this point, you have to read the directions. If the directions say they want the exact answer means they want to keep it in radical form like this. But some of the directions, like the worksheet that you're going to get today, are going to say round to the nearest hundredth, which means you need to get a decimal and round it to 2 decimal places. So that means you actually have to use your calculator to figure out the square root of 93 and make sure you round it to 2 decimal places. So you use your calculator. What does the square root of 93 come out to? Someone that has a calculator.
9.64.
Okay. Then you split this up into 2 parts. The plus or minus sign means you're first going to do plus, and then you're going to do minus. So I'll continue this over here. It's 7 plus 9.64 divided by 2, and 7 minus 9.64 divided by 2. It's really important that when you're using your calculator for these problems, if you type in 7 plus 9.64 divided 2 and then hit equals, the calculator is going to do 9.64 divided by 2 and then add 7. It's going to do it in the wrong order. So you got to make sure you type in 7 plus 9.64 equals and then divided by 2. And so that way it gives you 8.32. That's supposed to be 8.32. And then when you subtract 7 minus 9.64 divided by 2, that's negative 1.32. Alright, it sucks as it is to have these dots now. Sorry, but that's how it's going to go. So the answers were 8.32 and negative 1.32. So I'm going to let you try one by yourself, and if we all know what we're doing, we're going to move on. Hopefully we're going to be able to move on. So see if you can solve So I'll give you a couple of minutes to see if you can do it by yourself. We all should be able to. Remember that the one thing different here is that it doesn't equal 0, so you have to make it equal to 0 as your first step by subtracting over that 19.
Oh, that's a good question. Will you go to your room and get one?
Yeah, Lori's probably using
You can go next door and borrow it?
Sure, if she has one, yeah.
See if there's anything
I mean, it's working fine, but like at some point, it just, the writing messes up.
maybe in here. Anything on the
Yeah, I'm looking at the camera too right now. So excited that you got the right answer, I assume. What did you get? Did you already finish it? Oh, thanks. I'll just keep talking to myself up here, it'll be fun.
Oh, me?
Yeah, I figured that's why you dropped your phone, you got the answer, you were so excited you threw it up. What did you get? Did you already get it? What
No,
did you get?
not yet. Not
Okay.
yet. I got. Like,
Did everyone fly?
She
Perfect.
said she'll need it back at the
Yeah.
end of the term.
Thank you. You got what?
I got like a negative number and a square root.
Okay, we're actually going to do that next. If there's a negative number and a square root, that means you're going to have imaginary solutions. But this one should not have a negative unless you forgot to subtract 19 first. Did you use c equals 12? Okay. Like if you had a negative 7 here, it should be 5 plus or minus, and then negative 5 squared, which is 25, and then minus 4 times 3 times negative 7. So you have to do negative 4 times 3 times negative 7, which that comes out to positive 84.
Yeah, and then 25 minus 84.
But it's not minus 84, it was negative.
Plus.
Yeah. Did you learn that? Did you learn the quadratic formula song back when you first learned this?
No.
I was gonna say because people that use the song kind of mess this up because the song says minus 4, but you have to think of this as a negative 4. It's negative 4 times 3 times negative 7 is positive 84. So this is just 25 plus 84, which is 109. At this point, again, it's 109. You don't know what the square root of 109 is. Use your calculator, and it gives you 10.44. Does this happen in his hand too?
Yeah.
Okay. So now it's 5 plus 10.44 divided by 2, and 5 minus 10.44 divided by 2. And then you get your two answers. I'm sorry, yeah, divided by 6. So it's x equals
2.57 and -0.1.
Alright. Anybody have a problem with this?
Wait, why is it divided by?
Because a was 3 this time, so the formula is 2a.
Yeah.
So 2 times 3 was 6. Alright. Since you mentioned about the negative under the thing, I'll just go ahead and do that right now. Because you may have a quadratic formula problem. So it looks like it's the same thing. But when you start solving this, you have negative b plus or minus b squared is 16, and then negative 4 times 1 times 6. That gives you a minus 24. So you end up with a square root of negative 8. So you don't know what the square root of negative 8 is, you go to use your calculator, and it gives you an error. Unless you have this one Casio calculator that someone found yesterday that actually does this for you, which is great. But the graphing calculators and all that, they won't do it.
This one.
No, it's not that one. Yeah, because it's going to be an imaginary answer. So there is one calculator to do it for you, but unfortunately, no one's going to have that except for the one person that was in my second period class. And we've got to figure out a different way to figure the square root of negative 8. Okay, how? How do you know it's going to be an I, and what do you do to actually do this?
Negative and 8.
So you're going to separate the 8 and the negative 1, like that.
Yeah.
And since you've already started separating now you have to separate the 8 into what?
And negative. I mean, what do you mean?
Like it's the square root of 4 and the square root of 2.
Oh,
In your head, you know what the square root of 4 is.
yeah.
Nobody knows what the square root of 2 is. And we all should know what the square root of negative 1 is. It's I. Okay, there you go. So, it's 2I radical 2. Sometimes that works. It works on laptops too. So you got the square root of negative 8 is 2I radical 2. Normally, it's actually easier. It's less steps when it comes out to an imaginary solution, because at this point in the other problems, you would do 4 plus this, and then divided by 2, and 4 minus this divided by 2. But you can add 4 plus 2I radical 2. But there still is one last step we got to do here, which is simplify. You can simplify those numbers right there. Don't worry about the radical. The radical you've already simplified. You got to see those 3 numbers. If they simplify by the same number, you can reduce them all by that number. So they all reduce by 2. So this becomes 2 plus or minus I radical 2 over 1. You obviously don't need to put the over 1. So those would be your 2 answers. If you really wanted to write them separate, you could write 2 plus I radical 2, 2 minus I radical 2. And that's the end of that. Alright, so you have a couple of these to practice on your worksheet. And a couple of the ones that come out to regular numbers on your worksheet also. Now let's try completing the square. Because again, in one of my classes yesterday it went perfectly, and in the other class they claimed they didn't do it and all this stuff that they always say, you know, oh, we didn't do this last year, but you definitely did complete the square last year. Who remembers what to do for completing a square, because it's different than quadratic formula? Any ideas on what the first step is for completing the square? Completing the square is kind of annoying, but once you get the hang of it, it's always the same, like 6 steps over and over and over. The steps never change.
Yeah, it's negative 3 and negative 5.
The answer to this is definitely not negative. You're trying to do it by factoring, and that would have worked if the 10 was here and the negative 7 was here. Right? Because you have to multiply to give this, and it adds up to this, so it's not going to work. So the only way to solve this is either by quadratic formula or completing the square. So when you have your summative test on this, it's going to specifically say either use the one method or the other method. So you're going to have to know them both, even though most people I think would rather do this by quadratic formula and get it over with. Nobody remembers the first step of completing the square.
I feel like this is the one thing that was really annoying.
It's definitely not the one thing. Wait until next chapter when you start doing logs in here again. Everyone hated logs last year.
I get to see.
That's something to look forward to.
I hate it.
Forget that, just wait 2 more sections and you're going to be doing synthetic division and all that. Again, in 2 more sections.
Yeah, that's way better than that.
Than logs, yeah. Alright, since nobody remembers how to do completing the square, the first thing you have to do with completing the square is you have to move the constant, the number part, to the right. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to plus 7. So with the other one you need to equal 0, with this you don't. But what we're going to do here is I'm going to leave a little gap right here that we're going to fill in with a specific number. And once we fill in this gap, If you do it to one side, you're also going to do it to the other side.
25.
How do you know it's 25? That's correct.
Because that's 5 squared.
There's a formula for completing the square. It's a really easy formula. And the formula is you do b over 2 squared. So as soon as you move the constant over to the other side, you do b over 2 squared. Well, b is 10. It's the same as in the quadratic formula. So 10 over 2 is 5. 5 squared is 25. That means you're going to take a 25 and put it here in this blank, and a 25 and you put it here in that blank.
Is it
So-
always plus?
It's always going to be a plus because when you square something, it's always going to be a positive. So even if this was like a minus 10 and you did half that as negative 5, and negative 5 squared would still be a plus on both sides. So yeah, 100% of the time it's going to be a plus. So the right side gives you 32.
I'm not certain there. I mean, like, that's x plus 5x squared.
Okay, so you do remember completing the square then. At this point on the left side, the reason why I use b over 2 squared is because now this is supposed to factor very easily. And in this you do what multiplies to 25, it adds up to 10. It's 5 and 5. So instead of writing x plus 5 and x plus 5, I'm going to write it as x plus 5 squared. And again, that's going to happen in 100% of the completing the square problems, is you're going to end up with one parenthesis squared. That b over 2 squared formula makes it happen that way every time. So now we have this equation that we have to solve. So it started off like this, now it looks like this. How do you solve x plus 5 squared equals 32? You square root both sides. Yeah, the people were getting confused in my other class because they wanted to try to FOIL this. But if you FOIL it, it comes right back out to the previous step, and you're just kind of going back and forth. You have to do square root on both sides for this. Because the radical and the squared just cancel each other out, so all this left is x plus 5. And now you've got to do the square root of 32 on your calculator. And again, because this is going to ask for to the nearest hundredth, you don't need to simplify this, you actually have to figure it out, so it comes up to 5.666.
Yeah.
Okay. The one thing you have to remember about completing the square besides all these steps is at this point right here, it has to be positive and negative because just like the square root of 4 could be 2 or negative 2, this could be 5.66 or negative 5.66. So we're going to use the plus or minus sign just like we did in the quadratic formula. There needs to be 2 answers whenever it's a quadratic equation, unless for some reason it's the same answer twice. So it's plus or minus 5.66. So at this point we're going to split it up now into 2 parts. X plus 5 is 5.66, and x plus 5 is negative 5.66. So our 2 answers. No, the x plus, that part's not going to change. It's the plus or minus that's going to change on the other side. And then you're going to minus 5, so you get 0.66. And then this one is negative 10. Negative 10.66. So every single completing the square problem works exactly the same.
Move your mouse.
Okay. So it always starts off by moving the constant to the right, use the b over 2 squared formula, factor it on this side, it's always going to be something squared, square root both sides, make sure you do the plus or minus, and then just do it's always going to be one step, either plus or minus whatever that number is to the other side. So it really isn't that bad once you start doing them, because again, they all work the same way no matter what these other numbers are. It's always the same steps. And everyone does remember this now from last year, right? You definitely did this last year. So let's try. See if you can do this one by yourself, and then I'll throw in the extra 2 things that can. There's 2 ways that this gets a little bit tougher. But again, it's still going to follow the same steps, so it's not going to be that big of a deal. And we'll do that next after this. I assume that was add 13 to both sides first. That's exactly what I was gonna say. Do you actually have a plan? Do you understand what I'm doing?
Yeah,
Okay. So step by step what I did here was the first thing I added the 13 to the other side. Then in red, I did the b over 2 squared formula, which is plus 16 to both sides, which then here gives me 29. And here when you factor it gives you x minus 4 squared. When you have the squared, you square root both sides. The square root and the squared just cancel each other out, so it's x minus 4. This came out to 5.3 on your calculator. Make sure you use a plus or minus.
Isn't it 5.39?
I don't know. I'm just going by whatever someone said. I really don't know.
Yeah, it's
If it is 5, it's 5.39 instead.
yeah, July got it.
Okay.
No,
It's 5.3.
Yeah, but it's like
Round
386.
Oh, so it'll round up to 5.39 then, yeah. And then once you have that, now you just add 4 to both sides. So the first answer is 9.39, and the second answer is negative 1.39. Alright, so again, it's all going to work the same way. The what?
Sweet.
Yes, very sweet. So for the last problem that we're going to do today, what time is this class? I don't have a third period class, so we'll be in here until...
It ends at 11:05.
Okay. So two things are going to happen in this one that are going to be different. The one main thing is that there's now an A. And if you have an A, which means if there's a number in front of the x squared, you're going to have a hard time doing completing the square. Any ideas on what we should do to get rid of this A? Yeah. No matter what the A, if there ever is an A, you're going to take the entire problem and divide it by the A. So in this case, we're going to divide everything by 2. So you're going to take everything here and divide it. So it ends up being x squared minus 5x minus 5.5 equals 0. So first annoying thing that happens is now you have decimals in the very beginning of the problem. But again, your calculator is not going to care that it's decimals because you're going to get decimals at the end anyway. So you have a 5.5 instead of a regular number. No big deal. At this point, everything is the same. You just move this over to the right. do b over 2 squared. And here comes a second thing that's different. Is that now this is an odd number instead of an even number. When it's even, it comes out nice and easy. Because when you chop it in half, it's still a nice, easy number. But here, when you chop negative 5 in half, it's negative 2.5. And when you square that, that's plus 6.25. So now you have even more decimals. And here's the most confusing part about when there's an A and when you're trying to do this. Now you have to factor. So you've got to figure out what multiplies to 6.25 and has to add up to negative 5, which seems impossible because it's decimal. There's a really easy trick. Does anybody know what two numbers multiply to 6.25 and has to add up to negative 5? And if you do, how did you figure it out so quickly?
You mean what two numbers?
Yeah, if you're trying to factor this, basically what number is going to go inside here?
-2.5.
Why is it negative 2.5? That's correct.
Because it's half of the 5.
It's half of the 5, so negative 2.5 and negative 2.5 adds up to this. And we just did b over 2 squared, so we know that negative 2.5 times negative 2.5 is this. So what's always going to work, even if they're harder numbers, is if you just take this middle number here and chop it in half, that's always going to be the number that goes in here. And if I was able to look back, I don't know if it's going to work,
Oh wow, yeah.
but like if you notice here, look, if we chop negative 8 in half, it was negative 4. And if, it's not going to go up higher. And it is. If you chop positive 10 in half, it's positive 5. So it's always, oh, nice, it bounces up too. Great. So you can always just chop that number in half if you don't like factoring. And again, that's only going to work with completing the square. That's not a good way to factor, but it's always going to be a trick that works with completing the square. And now you just square root both sides. That comes out to 3.643. 43. Whoops. You break it up into the two parts, and we know what to do from there. Alright, so I'm going to give you one last problem. I'm going to pick one random person here at the end of this problem, and if you give me the correct answer, I'm going to shut up and leave. And if you don't, we're going to keep on working.
Oh my god.
As soon as we finish this problem, because I might call on you. What if I call on you? So do this one by completing the square. Again, I'm just going to pick a random person. I'm going to just pick a number between 1 and 20, and if that's your guess number, you're going to get picked. That's it. Let me move back. Where's that behind you? 14. So my 14 is here. Give you about 45 more seconds till I pick the lucky person. Alright, let's see who the lucky person's going to be that's hopefully going to make us stop doing math today. Possibly. Mrs. Fellner, pick a number less than 20, but don't pick 14 or 18. 12. Who's lucky desk 12? Number 12. What did you get for your final answer? You didn't get it yet? Okay, I'll give you some more time.
You're gonna.
Nope. Guess that means you got it done.
Can I go now?
Yeah.
When you use
If it was me solving this problem, I would actually use the quadratic formula. And technically, if you guys wanted to cheat on this, you could have just done this by quadratic formula, and it would have given you the same answer.
But when you.
But the only time you're ever going to actually use completing a square, unless somebody tells you to, is there's going to be problems with the x minus h squared plus k formula for graphing parabolas. You're going to have to use completing the square in order to get things in that standard form. So that's why you need to know how to do this. But yeah, you could have actually used quadratic on this and it would have been quicker, possibly. All right, so number 12, what do we get for our final answer?
1 is 0.62.
60 what? 62.
Number 1 is negative 7.62.
All right, let's see if those are correct. Is anyone happy with those answers or?
You just look the sign.
Oh wait, the signs are flipped one. It's negative 0.62 and 7.62.
That's right, yeah.
Okay,
Low key, close enough.
we'll see. We'll see how close it really is. Let's divide the whole thing by 4. So you get x squared minus 7x minus 4.75.
Yeah.
Actually, just to save one step, let me go ahead and add that 4.75 to the other side. So we have that. Now you have to do the b over 2 squared. 3.5 squared is 12.25.
Yeah.
So you have to add 12.25. And that gives you 17. Here, this is going to be x minus 3.5 squared. You square root both sides. The square root of 17 is plus or minus 4.12.
Yeah.
And then you have to do 4.12 plus 3.5, which is positive 7.62. And then the other one would have been negative 0.62. So the signs were flipped. If it was my class, I'd make us keep working, but if I'm subbing, I'll be nice, huh? Oh yeah, because that's wrong. If it was a test and you had that answer, you would definitely not get credit for that answer. You get like half off or whatever, because it's an easy mistake. How did you make that mistake, Matt? Did you have x plus 3.5 instead? All right, so your here's the worksheet, and there's 16 problems on this worksheet on this independent practice. Number 19. Number 19.
You're right.
Pick it over to 1 and 16.
I picked 4.
Okay, so we'll do 4 of these.
Oh,
4 or
how do you do? I'm not gonna argue.
I think I'm gonna do 4 of these.
Oh,
That's all you're gonna have is 4 of these.
I heard
It
they
should have been 1, but it's a good thing you didn't say 10.
I had to say 16.
Yeah, that would have been awful. He would have said 16. Alright, so I'll tell you the 4 that we're gonna do on here.
right now.
Yeah. Well, this is your independent practice.
No,
Was your independent practice in class?
I don't see that.
Today you'll do independent practice in class.
Let's do for the first quadratic formula section. We'll do numbers 6
Try
and
something
7.
for a change.
And from the completing the square section, let's do. I'll give you one easy one of 12 and one crappier one like 16.
Yes. It's Julie's. I
Oh.
promised her she'd get it back.
I don't know how to stop the recording now. I guess it's just this.
Space.